Okay, good evening everybody and welcome to An Evening with the Night for 2020. For those who don't know me, my name is Gregor Evans and I'm the Night's Managing Director. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet this evening. For myself, being in Caulfield East, it is the Boon Wurrung people of the Kulin Nation. I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and also to the Aboriginal elders of other communities who may be here this evening. Each year we put on an evening with the night, and the aim is to educate and guide our valued clients in relation to person and owners corporation matters. Our theme this year is Being Neighbourly. We believe it's a very topical theme considering how important it is to know your neighbours in light of the current situation with COVID. This evening, I'm joined by my colleagues, Mr. Tom Hood, who is an Owners Corporation Manager Team Leader, Ms. Alex Smale, one of our Owners Corporation Managers, and also Irene Opper from Neighbourhood Connect. You should be able to see them on your screen, perhaps, unless they need to speak, I'm not sure, but you'll hear from them later on anyhow. As mentioned earlier, there's a few housekeeping items I do need to address. So just to clarify that your camera and your microphones are switched off, and you should, however, be able to hear myself and see myself as well. Down the bottom of your screen, on your Zoom screen, there should be a Q&A button, and we've got a number of my colleagues standing by at the ready to answer any questions that you may have throughout the evening tonight. So feel free to ask away, and certainly if there's a question that may be a bit difficult for them to answer this evening, or we don't get to your question, we'll be compiling all the questions and formulating a FAQ, frequently asked questions document, which will be circulated subsequent to the webinar this evening. Also, just to make note that we'll be recording this webinar and we'll be circulating the recording to all participants, just in case you want to revert back to a particular point in the presentation or send it through to other people you may know who live in owners corporations. So without further ado, I'm going to now launch a poll, and that poll is going to ask a question in regard to the type of issues you may have experienced that have caused you a bit of grievance from your neighbours. So just bear with me one moment. I'm going to pop the poll up now. Okay, so I've just launched the poll. And the question is, please can you let us know which of the below issues you have experienced? So I encourage everybody to provide an answer or multiple answers, and we'll look at the results in a moment. Okay, a number of people have answered already, so which is great. Okay, so we've got noise complaints being the number one issue that people experience, and then closely followed by all the results are going here and there. So it looks like car parking is an issue. In fact, very even in terms of the responses. So I'll allow another couple of seconds for people to answer. We've received 58 of 86 participants responding, so 70% thereabouts have voted. Just give it a couple of more seconds before we release the results. Okay, I'm going to call it now. Alrighty, so thank you everybody who voted. I'm going to share the results right now. Okay, you should be able to see the percentage figures for each of those issues, and we've got noise complaints being the number one issue that owners or occupiers experience issues with, closely followed by car parking at 55%, and then we've got dumping of hard rubbish on common property at 49%. So thank you for, again, for sharing your answers with us. Okay, I'm just going to stop sharing the poll now. Okay, so this evening, we want to highlight the ways that being neighbourly can help these types of issues arise less frequently and ensure that they are easy to handle when they do arise. A community of owners who take the time to get to know each other and form strong connections with one another, usually find that the time-consuming and costly formal escalation process is avoided and the well-being of residents is increased. So now I'm going to ask Tom a question and ask him to talk through what this can look like, being the softer, more neighbourly approach to resolving conflict. Over to you, Tom.
Thanks, Gregor. I found a diplomatic, amicable approach often resolves conflicts quicker and more effectively than the usual go-to letters and emails which cite breaches of rules or legislation. The vast majority of our committees and owners corporations have a community-minded attitude. In respect to complaints handling, some put together a staged process which starts with a face-to-face conversation between the affected parties. Very strongly, we recommend that the very first sign of trouble, the affected party knock on their neighbour's door. If they have their phone number, give them a quick call. Just let them know that you're experiencing a problem. Perhaps even a politely worded and well-phrased letter under the door, in the letterbox, or on the notice board would address the issue. Most often, you'll find that the person causing the issue will be thank you for raising it with them, and even a little embarrassed their actions have caused a disturbance. When it comes to noise complaints, they'll likely turn down the volume, take their friends out to a different venue, or even wind up the event. People can be naturally empathetic and mindful of the impact their behaviour can have on others. In most cases, people never set out to cause offence or inconvenience any other parties. Of course, there needs to be a reasonable and friendly approach to the matter. Waiting until you're emotional or at your wit's end before you confront a problem often results in the outcome being completely the opposite to what you're trying to achieve. After all, when we honestly reflect, everyone has had a dinner with friends which got a little rowdy. I'd go as far as saying a dinner or a get-together every now and then can go a long way to maintaining a healthy and well-balanced existence. Giving your neighbours a heads up a week or two in advance can also go a long way to maintaining neighbourly relations. They may choose to spend their time elsewhere. I'm pretty sure we all agree being granted a little leeway here and there is a reasonable expectation to have, something I'm sure would be appreciated in return. We all appreciate it when someone takes the time to talk to us about an issue and provides us an opportunity to discuss a potential resolution, as opposed to finding out after the fact that other people were impacted negatively and that the matter was escalated. Receiving a communication advising us that we broke the rules doesn't usually sit well. Again, before the frustration sets in, the opportunity to raise a matter with a person civilly and directly will go a long way. You may find not only will the problem be resolved, but you'll have built lasting respect with one of your neighbours.
Very good. Thank you, Tom. And certainly that approach is relevant for situations that have occurred already. However, there is an alternative approach, and I'll ask Alex for you to touch on this, and you call this approach positive architecture. Are you able to tell us a little bit about it and provide some examples, please, Alex?
Sure. So I think one thing that's quite often overlooked in owners corporations is that the one thing that you'll really have control over is the environment itself. And there are ways to motivate behaviour by changing the environment. And this can actually also often be more effective than traditional punishments and incentives. So one example is, in order to deter graffiti, I've had an owners corporation install a mural. I've also got another OC that's looking at installing a plant wall. And there are lots of unintended benefits of this approach as well. So plants have tons of proven benefits. There's been studies to show that it reduces stress, depression, health issues. There's a reduction in crime as well when there are more plants in the streets. One very good example is there was a man in Oakland, California, who was so fed up with rubbish being dumped in front of his house, he actually installed a little Buddha statue, thinking that it would be neutral. He thought a statue of Christ would probably be vandalised. What happened was actually quite amazing. It wasn't just the rubbish that stopped being dumped. Crime went down 82%. That includes major crimes such as drug dealing, prostitution, aggravated assault. over time, the local Vietnamese community even turned it into a little bit of a shrine. So I think you'll find by modifying and beautifying spaces, it will also change the behaviour and will increase respect for the OC generally. I've also got a committee at the moment that's set up an amenities subcommittee with a 10-year plan for planned improvements to the common property. So it's another way to address it without going down the route of breach notices or telling people off.
Fantastic, very proactive in terms of being reactive to that type of situation. Now we're going to touch on owners corporation rules and how they can help with situations where there's conflict between neighbours. Every owners corporation has a set of rules, so whether that is the default owners corporation rules referred to as model rules, which are set out in the owners corporation regulations, or there's an extended set of rules that an owners corporation has established, usually at the commencement of an owners corporation. For relatively new properties, a developer will seek the guidance from a lawyer or potentially the selected owners corporation manager to provide owners corporation rules for the property. So the purpose of rules is to assist with the governing of conduct of lot owners, occupiers, and visitors to an owners corporation. Having said that, rules exist to protect your enjoyment and not restrict your behaviour. By abiding by owners corporation rules, you're doing your part to help promote a harmonious community, and also just to make note that there are limitations to what a rule can direct people to do. So for some further information about owners corporation rules, I'll look to you, Alex. And a lot of owners are unclear on just how restrictive rules can be. Can you please explain what makes a good rule and what can and what can't owners corporation rules restrict, please?
So there is some guidance in the Owners Corporation Act as to what makes a good rule. So the first thing is that it has to relate to the management or control or enjoyment of the common property or a lot. So you can't make rules about your neighbours as much as they might annoy you, or about council land either. It also must not unfairly discriminate. So it should be quite obvious to everyone that we can't discriminate on the basis of sex, race, things like that. But that's also why we can't ban short stay accommodation, much to the annoyance of many people in the audience, I'm sure, because it's discriminating a type of accommodation. Good rules also need to be consistent with other laws. So for example, if the Residential Tenancy Act says that you can't unreasonably withhold consent to have a pet, the OC also can't do so. So just noting on those points, it's a very good idea to get any proposed rule changes reviewed by a lawyer, because they'll be familiar with those laws, and that's a good step if you want to look at changing your rules.
Fantastic, thanks Alex. And Tom, if an owners corporation was looking to amend their rules, what would the process look like?
Amending rules, Gregor, can be a time-taking and potentially costly process for an owners corporation, particularly those with the higher lot numbers. In some cases, it could be a worthwhile exercise if the rules are either outdated or have too much ambiguity to allow for common sense application or enforcement. The process is actually set out, well, we rely basically in regards to Part 8, Sections 138 through and inclusive of 143 of the Act. Section 138, subsection 2 states that by special resolution, an owners corporation may amend or revoke any rules made under subsection 1. In that same section, subsection 1 states that by special resolution, an owners corporation may make rules for or with respect to any matter set out in the Schedule 1. Having some respect for the audience's time tonight, I'm not going to go through the schedule line by line. Instead, we've arranged for a copy to be put up onto the screen for you to review. Subsection 3, in comparison with the information you'll find in the schedule, states a rule must be for the purpose of the control, management, administration, use or enjoyment of the common property or a lot. In relation to the last few words of that section, it's important to note that, as Alex just mentioned, an owners corporation can't pass any rule which may discriminate against the lot owner or an occupier, nor can they be inconsistent with any relevant and applicable law. The special resolution may only be passed by either a ballot or a duly convened meeting of the owners corporation, and the text of the proposed resolution must appear on either the ballot document or the meeting agenda. This ensures each owner is aware of what they're being asked to vote for. Where possible, a summarised explanation to be included as to the why the resolution is being proposed is also beneficial. If the special resolution is passed, the next step is to lodge the amended and certified rules with the registrar, enabling them to be recorded in the register kept under the Transfer of Land Act. The amendments will come into effect on either the day they are recorded by the registrar in the register or at a later date, which can be specified in the rules themselves. Final step is to distribute a copy of the amended rules to all owners, and that must be done as soon as practicable after they've been lodged with the registrar.
Fantastic, thanks Tom. And just to reiterate the comment that once the rules have been changed, they need to be circulated to owners and residents. If they haven't been changed, it's integral that owners and residents understand what rules apply to their properties. So Alex, can you please comment on how owners or residents might be, how they can actually go about locating the Owners Corporation rules?
So if your property is with the Knight, it will be available on the online portal, which I believe we're going to share an image of. Yep, so you can just log into your property, and then once you're within the property screen, it will just be under documents and forms. Failing that, you can get it from the Owners Corporation Manager. It will also be included within your Section 32. So if you're purchasing a property within the Owners Corporation certificate, the rules will be attached. And if you want to know what the rules are before you purchase, it is a good idea to review them.
Very good. And certainly there's an obligation on a property manager to provide a copy of the rules to their tenants so they're aware. Okay, so as we've touched on, knowing your neighbours and building a community is the best strategy for reducing conflict. There are, however, at times a friendly conversation or another strategy, it doesn't work, and therefore we need to adopt a strategy that can progress the situation. So there is an ability to undertake a formal process. Tom, can you talk us through what this formal process might look like and what options are available to lot owners or occupiers?
Sure. So to formalise a complaints process, we refer to Part 10, Sections 152 through and inclusive of 159 of the Act. The process is highly summarised by just going through as I'm about to. An official complaint being registered with the Owners Corporation and Secretary, and it must be forwarded to the Owners Corporation for consideration. The Owners Corporation can decide to take action, to take no action, or to apply to VCAT for an order. The Owners Corporation cannot act unless the dispute process outlined in the rules has been followed, and that will often require a grievance meeting to be held between the parties involved. If action is decided, the breach notice can be issued, and it must outline the nature of the breach and provide 28 days to rectify the situation. If no action is decided, the complainant should be provided reasons as to why. If the breach notice is not effective, the Owners Corporation or the complainant may also make an application to VCAT. For civil matters like noise disputes between two people, VCAT will often rule that the Owners Corporation need not be involved. But this process is fairly heavy, and it should be only taken and referenced as a final means of escalation. Only applied in circumstances where everything else has failed and where the detriment to the rights of parties or the damage to the common property or Owners Corporation is significant and may have lasting effects. Instigating a formal complaints process to address a matter can create unresolvable tensions and will rarely achieve the desired outcome. The process, however, must be followed to ensure the legal protection of the Owners Corporation.
Thank you, Tom. And certainly it is a convoluted process. We actually have a flow chart that we've developed internally for our Owners Corporation management team. And the comment that was provided to me the other day was that it hardly flows. It goes every which way. So, but certainly as Owners Corporation managers, we can provide the advice to our clients in regards to what steps must be followed, as Tom mentioned, and guide you through that process. Alex, can you please touch on some of the things which owners should be aware of before taking this path?
Sure. So there's three major issues. One is time, the other is money, the final is the outcome. So as Tom has just gone through, there's a lot of time involved with this process. You have to wait out 28-day breach notices, you might have to wait for a meeting, then you might have to wait for a court date at VCAT. The next issue is money. So there'll be VCAT fees. You also might need to pay either a lawyer or your OC manager to attend VCAT at an hourly rate, and that can get very expensive. The final issue is you might not get the outcome that you want anyway. So VCAT doesn't necessarily have magic enforcement powers. I actually have a colleague who went to VCAT on a noise complaint, and the result of that was a VCAT order saying you must not make noise at these times. And I remember the client was looking at him saying, well, what next? And yes, you do have a court order, but it really is something that would have been better addressed between the two parties to come to a resolution.
Very good. Thanks, Alex. And Tom, I touched on before how us as Owners Corporation managers can get involved. Are you able to elaborate in regard to what role we play if tensions arise between occupiers?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess, Gregor, we consider ourselves in a very lucky position working with the Knight. We manage and gain experiences from such a broad range of owners corporations. To give you an example, we manage 2-lot developments which are divided by a fence and a party wall, to vast estates consisting of thousands of townhouses to 60-plus story apartment complexes, all with very differing demographics. That kind of diversity provides us the opportunity to draw on those experiences and share them with both our team and our clients, with the sole aim of seeking out and implementing achievable and lasting strategies to gain the best outcomes possible. Tonight, I think we've given you a brief overview of utilising approaches like positive architecture, as Alex touched on before, within the property to promote positive behaviour and implementing more amenable processes to address problems when they do occur. I mean, we are, as Owners Corporation managers, at our best when we're working in combination with our committees and or owners, building lasting relationships and strong communities while addressing matters which affect the common property and the ongoing operation of the Owners Corporation.
Thank you, Tom. And there's been a few questions that have been asked, and I'm just going to have a quick look at them and potentially answer them. So thank you to everybody asking questions on the Q&A function, and hopefully I see that 10 have been answered so far. So there's a question from Michael Phillips, and Michael's question is how the Victorian legislative change is likely to impact on current rules for owners corporations in 2021, and will the current rules of most owners corporations need revision? Thank you for your question there, Michael. Look, the owners corporation rules, the ability to make rules and the situations that they can refer to sit within the regulations, the owners corporation regulations 2018, I'm pretty sure, 19 with the last update to the regulations. So my understanding is that the changes to the Act won't have a significant effect on the rules at all, and owners corporations will not need to revisit the rules. And another question from Anthea Abraham. Her question relates to what can be done if an owner, not a tenant, has displayed regular disruptive and aggressive behaviour. The attempts to speak with the owner has worked at times, but is short-lived. Police have been contacted, again, short-term results. The answer is just, the question's just being taken away from me. Just give me one moment. Here we go. Police have been contacted, again, short-term results. This has directly affected the ability to lease apartments on the same floor. Thank you, Anthea. Look, it is a tricky one, Anthea, where certainly when you have somebody displaying disruptive and aggressive behaviour, it is the jurisdiction of the police to get involved. Yes, there may be owners corporation rules that they're in breach of, whether it's noise and I guess the quiet enjoyment of common property. So an owners corporation can go down the track of part 10, as Tom mentioned before, and that is holding a grievance meeting with the person, potentially getting a mediator involved to discuss the situation. But certainly, despite police not doing much, I'd be continuing with that pathway as well, just saying to the police, look, this is unacceptable, you need to get involved and try and resolve. But as I said, there is that second alternative option as well. Okay, thank you, Tom, and thank you, Alex, for answering those questions. So we've spoken a bit about how getting to know your neighbours and building a community is the best preventative measure in relation to reducing friction. There are also many other benefits of getting to know your neighbours, and to find out some of those benefits, what they are, I'd like to now introduce you to Irene Opper. So Irene is the National Manager of Neighbourhood Connect, whose mission is to make it easy for people to get to know their neighbours. They provide free resources, encouragement, and support to those looking to establish a neighbour or community group. So Irene, thank you very much for joining us this evening. Are you able to explain a bit about Neighbourhood Connect and what it's about?
Thanks, Gregor, and hello, everyone. Yes, Neighbourhood Connect is this project that is all about trying to create a connected neighbourhoods movement all across Australia. There's so many benefits of connecting, but people really haven't known how. So what we've come in and said, okay, we're going to make that easy. So Neighbourhood Connect became a national not-for-profit and charity and is offering the support to people in apartments and in streets to make those connections, and as a result, feeling happier, safer and more supported. And the reason for that is because we know that life is better when we belong. So we've found that people need the tools, they need encouragement, and they need ideas, and we provide all of those for people so that they can start a neighbours group. And many people have actually heard about what it's like when you've got a good sense of community. Some of them have actually felt that themselves, lived in an area where there is community, like I did. I lived in this little town of Mount Nebo. It was a village of 600 people in the rainforest, right near Brisbane. And it was a natural community where so many things happened, where the people there would regenerate the forest, where they would put on a community newsletter. We had a hall which we kept in our own hands instead of handing to the council. We were able to have a big debate when there was a controversial issue and take a vote and tell the council of our decision. The council ignored it and we were able to blockade them the next morning because we were all linked. We were all a community. We were able to raise money in our regular music nights because people had that talent to give. And we sent tools to Mozambique and did all sorts of things. So some of us have had that experience, and some of us know people that have, our parents or people have come from other cultures. So Neighbourhood Connect is really about saying, let's make that available for everyone, not just the lucky few.
Fantastic. Thank you, Irene. And you touched on the benefits of being socially connected. So can you just elaborate a little bit more in regard to why, what the benefits are and why it's so important to be connected with your neighbours? Yes.
I don't know if all of the people here know, but 1 in 4 of us are lonely. Now that's quite concerning. That's from research in Australia. And loneliness is as bad for our health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It affects us as much as being physically inactive or obese. People who are lonely die at a younger age. Lonely people actually have much higher levels of depression and anxiety and a loss of confidence. So loneliness is a real problem in Australia. And I'll just share a little quote from Hugh Mackay, who's a social researcher and author. He says, depression and anxiety can lead to suicide. Friendship, connectedness, engagement, community, these are the great lifesavers. So social connection, which is the antidote to loneliness, is not just nice to have, but it can actually save people's lives. So it's crucial, it's really critical. In every person who's in this webinar today, there will be some people in your building that are lonely. A neighbours group fixes that, if they choose to get involved. Obviously, it's not going to be for everyone, but for those that take up the opportunity, there's no reason for them to feel lonely anymore. There's a few other things we know, and that's that 35% of people trust their neighbours. That means the vast majority of people don't. That's a real concern. only a third of us, or a third of us are not involved in any social or community groups. So there is a lot of social isolation out there. And Neighbourhood Connect is about fixing that by providing the answer. And what we also know is people with those good connections, they are happier. They experience less depression, less anxiety, less physical health problems. People build friendships, and that improves their health and well-being, and improves their social life. There's a lot of people that don't have any family around, and so this makes a huge difference when the neighbours come in that place. And it also is about increasing the social support. So 1 in 10 people in Australia lack social support, but we did a survey of the people who lead our neighbour groups. Not a single one of them felt that they didn't have social support. And I'd say that the members of their groups would say the same thing. So it's such a simple thing as forming a neighbour group and being kind and good to each other has such huge impacts positively on our lives.
Fantastic. And you're speaking from first-hand experience. Could you tell us a little bit about your experience, your apartment block?
Yes, so I moved to an apartment block in St Kilda, and that's a picture of some of my neighbours here in our shared barbecue area. So I moved to St Kilda from Brisbane, so I knew no one here. So over a bit of time of being here, I got to know maybe 4 or 5 people a little bit. And then I decided, because I was involved with Neighbourhood Connect, I decided I better put my money where my mouth is and actually start a neighbours group in my own building. So what I did was just put a simple, friendly invitation in every letterbox and just said, hey, everyone, you're invited to come to my place for a morning tea and bring a plate and let's just get to know one another. And I was amazed when half of the building came along. And people were saying, this is wonderful. This is so good to come together for a positive social reason. And people said it's really interesting to see how each apartment is, because they're all a little bit different, but they've got the same basic plan. And so a neighbour then said, hey, come to my place next. And someone else said, okay, come to mine after that. So from that first time, people were saying, yes, we want to become a neighbours group. We want this friendliness. We want this way of connecting so that we can then help one another. Then we expanded. So people said, well, why don't we go and try the restaurant? We've got a nice one that was 5 minutes walk. So we've had some lovely dinners over there and tried other places. And then we've also got that shared barbecue area that you just saw. So every now and again, it'll be bring a plate, let's all have a meal down at our barbecue area. Sometimes we might do some storytelling or do something special for Neighbours Day or another thing. So we also then have an email list because of this. So we use email to invite everyone whenever there's an activity, but we also use it in other ways. People can use that to say, hey, who knows a good whatever? And people can also say, oh, hey, I've got this to give away, or I'm stuck at home and I'm not well, and can someone pick up some things for me? So we can help one another in all sorts of ways. And in fact, there's a person in the building who became quite ill. And so he put it out there, look, you know, I'm going to be ill. I've got a lot of appointments, a lot of things I'm going to have to go through. Who can help my partner and I through this time? And he had quite a lot of support offered. People said, yeah, what do you need? Do you need tell me when you need a lift, tell me when you need something picked up. So all sorts of help came their way. And both of them didn't have any family around here. So the neighbours were the social support at that critical time. And at the end of a number of months of this support, they threw a party to just say, thank you, what a difference this has made. So I guess my own experience in my building is it's both the little things, just the friendliness as we see one another, but it's the really big things as well. And interestingly, I spoke to someone else in another apartment block, and this woman said that she had created a neighbours group in her block, and one of the things they did was that they showed a whole range of the people living in that building some special process for the lift that was needed in case it needed to carry a stretcher if someone was ill. Now, I don't know why it needed a special thing, but there was some process. Because there was a neighbours group, quite a lot of people learned how to do that. And as it happened, that woman's husband had a heart attack, and one of the neighbours was able to let the ambulance in, and it saved his life. So
Wow.
you've got to have this in place before you need it, not afterwards. And that's why we see this as the social infrastructure that we want to have in every apartment block, in every set of townhouses, in every street.
Terrific. Amazing, positive environment, it seems, in your building. For others, are there any other tips you can share to have them connect better with their neighbours?
Yes, I think it is important to form an actual neighbours group rather than just being friendly. We've found that people have a sense of belonging to a group that way, and it gives people permission to suggest things that you might do together. But just generally being friendly, talking to people. And the gatherings we've had, we've kept it positive. We'd made sure it wasn't about talking about the problems in the building. And the feedback I got was that it worked for us having it separate to the body corporate. It might not be the case for every building, but the feedback I got was that when the body corporate committee had tried having some social activities, some people came, but the topic of conversation ended up being, oh, the lifts are clunky, there's this problem, there's that problem. And so people left that feeling like, oh, that wasn't a great event, because they focused on problems. Whereas the fact that I did this quite separate, but it could be done by the body corporate, but as long as it was framed really clearly that this isn't about talking about the problems. This is about let's get to know each other as people, as neighbours. So that really positive slant, I think that's the biggest tip. But once you have a neighbours group, do simple things regularly. Don't make it difficult. Just simple things regularly. Bring a plate works really well, or if you're going to a cafe, people just pay their own. It's nice and simple. It doesn't need funding. Help one another, offer things, share things. Why do we all need one of everything when we can share? So that's, those are the main tips, I would say.
Fantastic. And when there is a bit of conflict within a community, whether it's a townhouse estate or an apartment building, how does Being Neighbourly help that situation?
It helps because people generally will have a really positive view of living in the apartment block because they've had some good times with neighbours. So those there are always some really negative people in any community. Probably the really negative people probably won't come. So the neighbour group tends to be quite positive because people who want to connect will come. So it doesn't eliminate the problem of the really negative person, but it usually doesn't get wrecked by them coming along. It could encourage someone who is just a little bit negative to become more positive. It sets a tone of that this is a friendly place. It also might be that if there is someone who's really causing quite a problem, it might be that because there's a neighbour group, there can be a few people that might go together to knock on the person's door and just say, look, this really is a problem for those on your floor. Let's talk about it. What can we do? And that way it's taking the heat off the direct neighbour to be the one to try and solve it. So that's a way to help one another. So it's not going to solve the really, the aggressive person or the really negative person, but it just creates a tone where the majority of people won't be like that.
Very interesting. And certainly there was a question before in regard to someone having a grievance with one of their neighbours, and that person was being quite aggressive, and despite a friendly approach, that they didn't get any resolution. And then they looked towards the NICE and the Owners Corporation Committee. At times, we are we're in the middle of the committee, and the committee may not want to progress that situation because it's between two residents only, and therefore the committee's view is that they should be progressing the situation themselves, whether it's following the Part 11 of the Owners Corporations Act, when an individual can go to VCAT. So having a neighbours group potentially could be an avenue where it's not the committee having to deal with it, but a subcommittee or that group where they can approach that person and just take them aside, have a chat, and try and get them on the same page with everybody else. So
I think I'd agree with what was said earlier, avoiding the formal process wherever possible.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of ways you could do. So once you've got your neighbours group and you share with them, look, I am facing this problem. If people can support by either, having, 3, 4, 5 people directly communicating to that neighbour, look, this is causing a real problem. Could you put an end to it now? And then they feel, there is quite a few people telling me this. Another way could be that the neighbours that will support the one having the problem could just all sign a letter which goes to that person. So again, we're avoiding the whole formal process, but it's showing that neighbour that they're out on a limb here. They're acting in a way that none of the neighbours think is okay. So it's really not fair that it stays the problem of the direct neighbour. This is all about how can we help one another to have a good environment for everyone. So again, this is neighbours looking out for that person who's suffering because of the difficult person. So it's about, let's be creative. What can we do to help our neighbour who is struggling with this problem, instead of that view of, it's an individual problem. Definitely. So the collective answer is that everyone in the building wants a good environment. So yeah, what can we do to make sure that we all have it, including that person having a problem right now?
Very good. And just there was a question earlier as well regarding whether the participants were owners or tenants. So the majority would be owners, our valued clients, but we did open up the invite to other sources. So there may be a few tenants in here as well, but I guess the neighbours group, it doesn't discriminate between owners and tenants. It would actually, there'd be a mixture of both, I would imagine.
And that's right. And that is very important because, so for example, in my building, the previous social gatherings done by the committee, the tenants didn't really feel that it was for them. So not many of them would have gone along. Whereas when I did it, I actually was very explicit in my invitation. This is for all neighbours in this building, whether you own or rent, whether you're here a long time or a short time, it is for all of us. Please come along. And I think that making it equal and even for everyone, I think that's a real plus of a neighbours group. And I guess that's a good reason to have it a bit separate from the committee.
Definitely. Interesting, up in New South Wales, in their legislation, I think they refer to a residents group having to be formalised. But down here in Victoria, there's no requirement. Certainly, we'll be having this discussion with a number of our clients regarding setting up whether it's a subgroup, I don't think it's a committee, maybe a working group or just a group in general. How can people get in contact with you, Irene, and Neighbourhood Connect to seek some support in regard to convening that group? Sure.
Well, there's a lot of great information about us on our website, which is www.neighbourhoodconnect.org.au, and you'll get some information sent to you, emailed to you afterwards. You can also come to one of our free webinars, which you'll see on the website. You can also email me at irene@neighbourhoodconnect.org.au, or you can phone me on 0413 706 233. So we're here to help you get things going, and we've got a lot of good tips and tools for that.
Fantastic. And I'm just going to open it up to the audience. There may be a few questions out there regarding what you do. Just going to have a quick look at the Q&A. Okay. Alrighty, there's a question here that says, do you have any tips for connecting without neighbours during, I think that means, let me just read that. Do you have any tips for connecting with neighbours, it should be, during COVID restrictions?
Yes, so COVID has changed things for all of us. and it's made some things a bit more challenging, like creating a neighbours group. So we have adapted our process. So we now step people through a process to still create a neighbours group without the face-to-face contact. But of course, we hope that we will get back to that. But it's still really important. So I wouldn't suggest people wait. I think now more than ever, we need those connections, because there are some people stuck in their apartments completely alone. So it's the same process of giving people an invitation to connect as part of the neighbours group, and using then email or Facebook or WhatsApp to start communicating. And in that communicating, which isn't face-to-face, you can say, okay, how's everyone going? Has there been any bright spots in this? What are people doing for exercise? Who needs a hand? Who's got something to give? Who needs someone to call them regularly? And what you might find is there might be a handful of people who respond to that and say, oh, I'm totally alone, or I'm not getting along with those in my house. I would love someone to give me a call every day or two. So those people can then just be paired up, and all of a sudden you've addressed the isolation of some people in your building. So there's simple things like that that can be done once people have opted in and you can communicate with everyone.
Fantastic. Yeah, I actually heard of an anecdote where somebody, or a group of people in a building, they actually just printed out a whole lot of pamphlets. It was a bit of a checklist asking people what they wanted help with, whether it was picking up some groceries from down the street for an elderly resident perhaps, or just having a chat with somebody. As you mentioned before, that loneliness is a huge issue at the moment in apartment buildings and townhouses. So picking up the phone to somebody on another level, or even just catching up in a common corridor, social distancing, of course, with masks on, just have some interaction can certainly help a lot.
And what about a weekly Zoom or other video system happy hour? Something like that, where people can come along if they want to. So for those that don't have enough contact, that can be really important. It might be the only social avenue they've got. And it's so easy.
And so you touched on the communication. There's a question from Simon. Thank you, Simon. Asking about their owners corporation in Yarra's Edge. They use Community Link as a platform. Are you aware of any other platforms that can be used to interact with residents?
We tend to keep things quite simple. So like I've got a local neighbours group, but it was just the building, and then it expanded to be all of the streets around us. Mm-hmm. And because our area is not a young area, so we found that email works best. So we've simply created a separate Gmail account for the group. And it is important to have a few leaders. We call them connectors. So all of those connectors in my group, there's 5 of us, we can all share the login for that account, and then we can all send messages to everyone. And we do it where people can reply all and reach everyone. So we don't want to control the communication. So that's a really simple, straightforward way. Other areas, particularly if it's a young area, they've done Facebook, and they communicate with everyone that way. Some people like WhatsApp. But always be mindful of that small number that phone might be the only thing they do, particularly in elderly people. So always try and think about those people. And you might have an email for most people. And then if there's 1 or 2 who say, I don't even do that, ask for a volunteer in the group who's willing to call those couple of people that don't have any other way. So just be mindful of people's differing needs, but I don't think it needs a complicated system to communicate.
Very good. And just before you finish up, did you have any final remarks that you'd like to share with everybody this evening?
Sure. I think there's a really nice quote I'd like to share, again from Hugh Mackay in his book, Australia Reimagined. And it's, the state of the nation starts in your street. Think about the kind of neighbourhood you'd like to live in, and then start living as if it's that kind of neighbourhood. Pretty soon it will be. So I think that's really lovely. And that's really about the intent to do this. But what we've learned is that that how-to was the missing piece. And we hope that that's what we supply. So together, everyone who's listening can contribute to us creating this connected neighbourhoods movement.
Fantastic. Well, it's been a pleasure having you this evening, sharing what you do, Irene, and certainly, no doubt, there'll be a lot of people contacting you. And just to confirm that we'll be sharing your details with everybody who's attended this evening in an email subsequent to the event. So once again, thank you and enjoy your evening, Irene.
Thanks, Gregor.
No worries. I'm just going to take this opportunity now to mention that the night actually offers community grants to our valued clients. And last year we had a number of community building initiatives that were implemented. So we actually, there's a trick or treat event, and if you see on your screen, that's on the top right hand corner is a photo from that event. And you heard from Alex Smale earlier tonight. She's the lady on the left. So that was a terrific event for a townhouse community where the kids got involved, and people put balloons on their front gates to signify that they were participating in the event. Other events that we've supported, Christmas in July, there was a bit of vino in the gardens for a property that's in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. We had a residents catch-up for a property on Queen's Road in Melbourne, that's the bottom right. And then also another catch-up for another property, top left, for a property in the northern suburbs. So we do this every year. We allow community initiatives to be implemented, and we support them with grants. And in the pipeline, we've got a number of activities that will be occurring post-COVID, which includes the formulation of a community garden, a rooftop yoga session for residents, as well as a celebration for residents to get together post-COVID. So I'm very much looking forward to those events, hopefully later this year, and if not, then early next year or next year sometime. So just to remind people that we'll be providing grants for 2021. We'll be issuing an application form with our communications, so feel free to apply, and our judging panel will consider every single application and look to award grants to a number. So it's a total of $3,000. There's a maximum of $1,000 per owners corporation. However, last year there was I think 4 or 5 grants that we provided because the amount wasn't as high as $1,000, obviously. Okay, so that wraps up the Being Neighbourly portion of the evening. So again, thank you to Irene, Tom and Alex for sharing your time and insights this evening. Just before I wrap up the event, just a few final housekeeping things. So just to remind everybody that it was recorded, and we will send out a recording to everybody. We've got a number of staff who have been very busy behind the scenes answering a number of questions, and I think in total there's been about just shy of 40 questions asked and answered. So we'll collate answers to those questions and provide a list to everybody so you can all see those responses. And apologies for any question that we didn't get around to answering, but certainly we'll look to answer that in the FAQ document. A survey will have opened in your browser. Hopefully it will open in your browser shortly, and we certainly welcome your feedback on tonight. In unusual circumstances, we hope you enjoyed the webinar format. Typically it would be held as a venue, and there'd be a few glasses of wine and nibbles as well. So unfortunately couldn't do that this evening. But just want to thank everybody for participating with us this evening, and wishing you all good health in this current circumstance, and hope that you can enjoy the night. Thank you.